Well, let's start out by, I'm going to tell our story, the history of Larry Bruno Foundation. This will be our 10th year in existence, and we're a nonprofit organization with the support of Beaver Falls native Joe Namath, of course. Continues to expand its Hall of Achievement and History Center. Right now it's in the Carnegie Library of Beaver Falls, and we want to
Thank you.
also imagine that we have just purchased a building on 7th Avenue to put in a retail center, and we'll have Steve talk a little bit about that in a second, and classrooms to be able to host art training and teaching of coaching the culture, of how we can help former coaches, current coaches, teachers, parents, and businesses to improve their offerings through the visions of the Larry Bruno Foundation. So we've learned in our history that teamwork is one of the most important aspects of the 7 attributes that Coach Bruno taught us, and we're recruiting our peers and our inductees of the Larry Bruno Foundation to come in and help us to talk about teamwork. One of the other attributes that we also learned is integrity, and we'll be talking and teaching about that. Communications is one of the other attributes. Leadership, of course, we learned that from Larry Bruno, and building our culture. Motivation, reverence, and discipline are the 7 attributes. So those are our teaching attributes that we will be passing on through our organization. But right now, we want to talk about our programs that we offer. I have with me our friends. All of us played for Coach Bruno, and Judge Rick Mancini and Steve Higgins, our curator here at our library museum. So Rick and Steve, why don't you chime in and tell us about some of the programs that we have?
For example, our new building that we acquired down on 1112 7th Avenue, it's important that we have face to the organization, basically. We plan on having a conference center in there. We plan on having a little retail space, and we are going to have a museum atmosphere down there. It'll be a place where we have a business office where the public can walk in and discuss things with us. And it's basically making us available to the public, which we want to be. We want to be a big part of the community, and we want to be a big part of the resurgence that's going on in Beaver Falls recently. And we think it's important to be a part of everything. And by having our new location, we'll be more visible, more accessible to the public. We'll be able to have some of the programs and that we have been planning the last few years, and just kind of stockpiling these ideas up. And now we'll have a chance to actually implement some of these ideas and present them to the public and get the community involved in what we're all about. We think we have a great thing going here with the Larry Bruno Foundation. We're doing a lot of good in the community. People seem to respond to us positively, and we want to continue, the good work that we started. We want to continue with it, and we're looking forward to getting that going sometime in 2020, getting that new space up and running. So,
Well, Steve, you have been basically in charge of what I would call our physical plant, and what I mean by that is obviously we have a great Hall of Fame set up at the Beaver Falls Carnegie Library here in downtown Beaver Falls, and I think we've been a good presence here for the library. And as you indicated, we are moving into a new building that we just bought. I think we'll maintain a little bit of a presence here at the library because we always want to be supportive of them, but we are going to move the main part of our Hall of Achievement to the building that we just purchased. But I think it's important that people understand from whence we came. And what I mean by that is our organization actually started with a meeting of about 3 or 4 of us who were concerned about Coach Bruno because he was near the end of his days. He was in an extended care facility, and we were actually concerned about him financially. And we felt that for all he had done for so many of us, the least we could do was find a way to help him out. So our discussion started with thinking about selling a strip ticket to raise a little bit of money in case he needed it. Well, that discussion evolved into the thought that he has helped so many over so many years. Why don't we get the word out and see if we can get individuals to contribute? And then we thought maybe the best thing to do is to have somewhat of a reunion of his former players where we honor him and bring in those that are both his peers and his former adversaries and have them speak about him. And hopefully we were hopeful that we would get a good turnout from his former players and people in the community that he helped. Well, the end result of that was perhaps to this day the single biggest sports-related banquet-type event in the history of Beaver County, and that took place at the Lodge at Brady's Run, where we were hoping to get a couple hundred people. As it turned out, we had to open every door in the facility because we had about 1,200 people that showed up, many of which were former players and, of course, former coaches. Coach Yanessa from Aliquippa, Coach Bernardi, Coach Lindy Laurel, Coach Tarquinio, Coach Hamilton, and the list goes on, and I'm sure I left others out. And then, of course, we had several of his former players come up and speak, to the point that it probably went on about 3 hours longer than we should have had it go on. But as a result of that particular event, where our goal was just to raise a little bit of money to help Coach Bruno out, we not only had an effective event, but our biggest benefactor, and of course Coach Bruno's most famous pupil, Joe Namath, forwarded a tremendous donation from his foundation that he established in Alabama, which then meant that we had a nice fund that was available to help Coach Bruno. Well, of course, he didn't live too much longer after that. It was within a couple years that he passed away. So now he's gone, and we have this money in the account, and we decided the best thing we can do is to carry on his legacy by establishing the Larry Bruno Foundation. Our goal being to give back to the community much in the same way that he did, not just financially, but in all aspects of life, teaching, coaching, mentoring, just being there, knowing that the biggest impact you can have on someone is to send them down the right path, and not only send them down that path, but help them down that path, which is what Coach Bruno did. So that's what our foundation is all about, and we try to carry that on every year. I believe it's known, we give scholarships out every year to high school students, both from Beaver Falls and Black Hawk. We also, in the last few years, have started honoring people in the community in general, and giving donations to their organizations, and in order to help them. And of course, it's evolved into our annual event, which is our banquet for the Larry Bruno Foundation, and we've established what many people would refer to as a Beaver Falls-related Hall of Fame, which is actually the Larry Bruno Foundation Circle of Achievement. And I initially had mentioned how Steve has done a great job with the physical part of that, and anybody who has ever been to our facility would agree that it's first class all the way. With the inductees and the different memorabilia that we have honoring those inductees. And it's just been a great thing, and we plan on continuing on with it. We have some great board members. Of course, our chairman is Ron Main, our former vice president, who for health reasons hasn't been able to be as involved much anymore, Kenny Thomas, Ed DeRose, of course, Steve Higgins, Pete Petrandria, Artie DeSisto, Linwood Alford, Bobby Rickey, Jimmy Carbone, and I have the good fortune of being on the board, even though Ron forgets to mention that every time he talks. But we have a great group, and our goal is to continue on the legacy of Coach Bruno, but that legacy is not about just Coach Bruno. It's about giving back to the community and helping those that need help, which is what Coach Bruno was all about.
Yeah, Rick, I think some of the programs you touched on, I want to kind of reiterate here, is we give out scholarships for the football players, the academic award winners at both Beaver Falls and Black Hawk school districts, and we've done For the last 10 years, we've done that, and now we've included the Beaver County Christian School as one of our targeted scholarships. We also made a partnership with the Livingston's group. That was Bill Livingston, who was a judge here in Beaver County, and also we now give scholarships to young students that are going to college to become law enforcement officers. We also work with Pat Nardelli and his group to give community service awards. And last year we did give it to Tiger Paws. And what's his name? Matt
Nance.
Matt Nance. He proudly displays it down in one of his restaurants that he's created. The Reed Award to Community Development this year, that went to Rebecca Flicka for her work with the Christmas dinners.
You're talking about the Joe Tronzo Award.
I'm sorry, got
Given
that
in the
backwards.
name of the Tronzo family, and the first recipients of that award were the Salopeks.
That's correct.
Rebecca and Steve Salopek, who sponsor the Christmas dinner every year, which actually takes place at the Beaver Falls High School. It's a free dinner for anybody that wants or needs to come and have a meal at Christmas time. And in addition to that, they give gifts out to the children. And it is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. If you were to go down there on Christmas Day, you would see a gymnasium, a regulation-sized high school gymnasium full of clothes and toys. And I'm not talking about secondhand stuff. I'm talking about brand new clothes, brand new toys that have been donated from many, many organizations, to the point that when they're done with the day, they have truckloads of stuff they have to take away and they give to other organizations. It's just a tremendous blessing to our community.
So all of this is part of what our vision is, which is the culture. The culture is helping families, community members, individuals to become better at being citizens in our community. And what Rick just spoke of is a key component to helping us build that culture. We call it coaching the culture, so that we can become a culture of excellence and having fun and diversity. I mean, that's a big part of our thing.
And Ron, you mentioned the Pat Nardelli Award, something we started giving out recently. Pat is a nationally known developer who is actually from Coppell, Pennsylvania. So he's not too far from the Beaver Falls district. And Pat has been a tremendous supporter of our organization. And he helps us continue the tradition.
Yeah, and going forward with what some of the programs that the Larry Bruno Foundation is interested in is what we're doing right now is to create podcasts of information, of knowledge, of storytelling, of the people that have been successful in achievement, because we call it the Hall of Achievement. And it's those achievers that we want to emulate, we want to revere. So, Steve, tell us some of the inductees that we have in our hall right now, just to give some examples of who we've...
Well, we've been inducting people for the last 10 years, and we have 48 inductees total. And they're some of the names we have on the walls here. We have Joe Tronzo, and we have Judge Richard Mancini. We have Terry Turconi, a great gymnast. We have Rocky Washington. We have Judge Tookie James. We go back. There's no time limit on how far back we go. Jimmy Mutchler, who graduated in 48 from Beaver Falls, 1948, is one of our inductees. We have Tony Asaldo from Coppell, who was a big contributor in youth football and helped contribute to the success of Beaver Falls football on the varsity level. Joy Jeter, who many consider our best female basketball player ever. And how can we forget maybe our greatest female athlete ever, Candy Young, who was an Olympian in 1980. She's one of our proud inductees. We have Jack Damaska, who was a great baseball player at Beaver Falls, one of our best. And, of course, we have the familiar names that most people are familiar with, the Namath, Joe Waltons. In there, Tommy Krasminski, we have Carl Flory, Joe Lonnet, who was one of our greatest all-time athletes ever. So the names here are really impressive, people should come down here and visit us at the library. We're open Saturday mornings from 10 to 12, and we are going to increase things when we get settled in our new building. But if you have pride in your community, if you're interested in your community, you really need to come down here and check this facility out. Most everything in here has been donated by the public. I'd say 80% of things in here are all donated. We do purchase the plaques when we induct our Circle of Achievement inductees, but everything is donated by the community. So this is a community place, and it's something that we want people to come see.
And, Steve, one thing that I'm proud of, and I know all of you share this with me, our inaugural class, our first inductees, there were 3 of them. One was James Bucky Mutchler, who caught the pass from Johnny Unitas that led to the touchdown by Alan Amici in what people call the greatest game ever played, when the Baltimore Colts beat the New York Giants. That was our own Bucky Mutchler to set that up. And then, of course, the other inductee, one of the other inductees that year was the most famous football player in the world, and perhaps the most famous individual during his time in the world, none other than our own Joe Willie Namath. And Joe has been such a great friend, and what a great guy he is. I mean, he's just an unbelievable person. He's a Beaver Falls guy that went up and took over New York City and eventually took over the country. And we're so proud of him. And then, of course, our third inductee that year, our first year, was the best, Coach Bruno.
Right. And it was so special to see Joe that first year with Bucky Mutchler here, and Joe looked up to Bucky so much, and the respect that he showed Bucky was heartwarming. Yes. And before Joe came along, Bucky was our top NFL player, probably, him and Joe Walton.
Correct.
Were up there, and they were the best, and the respect that Joe showed those guys was, it's part of what we're all about.
And also, if you remember, for that first event, one of Joe's former teammates came back and was a big part of the event, Vito Babe Pirelli.
Pirelli, boy, was he sharp. I tell you, his football mind was so sharp. And Joe, again, looked up to Babe just like he looked up to Bucky and showed respect to them guys. And it was really nice to see that.
And that's a great point, how Joe, who is, again, the most notable, always shows respect to those that came before him. And, just the different comments that he has made. And he's been to every banquet. I think he only missed one, and that one that he couldn't be at for some reason, he sent a pretty lengthy video that we played at the banquet. But one thing that stands out of my mind is that when Tom Krasminski, another tremendous athlete, who went on Michigan State. He was the captain at Michigan State, and then he eventually played for the Jets, and just a legendary Beaver Falls name. One of the things that stands out of my mind is that when I was, as the MC, was introducing people at our banquet during the year Tom Krasminski was being inducted, him and Joe were sitting next to each other, and I was talking about people in the audience, and I overheard Tom Krasminski say to Joe, "Look, Joe, there's Richie Nightaballa. Heck, he was better than both of us."
And he is one of our inductees also.
Yes.
See, that's the thing about Beaver Falls. There are so many great athletes through the years that even guys like Joe Namath and Krasminski could point to other players that they've known and played against, and that they could feel that way about and say that they were better than us. But it's something that how Beaver County, the kind of talent we produce here, Babe Pirelli, arguably the greatest college quarterback of the decade of the 50s, and Namath, arguably the greatest college quarterback in the decade of the 60s, both grew up in Beaver County. So it's just a sample of the talent that...
And I remember at one of our events, and obviously we've had quite a few now as years goes on, and I've had the pleasure of having the opportunity to speak at all of them. One thing that stood out in my mind and still stands out in my memory, I look out into the audience, and who is there? None other than Ronald Poe James. Without question, arguably
legend.
one of the best football players ever to come out of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Well, let me throw this out then. We're talking about football players, but this year we've added a lady by name of Elizabeth Betty Ash Douglas. And let me read a little bit about Betty. Betty grew up in Beaver Falls in the same neighborhood of Joe Namath, by the way. They were almost across the street from each other. She attended and graduated Beaver Falls High School in the early 40s, where she won Scholastic Awards in poetry, short story writing, and studied 10 years of piano here, and also sang in the choirs and was a Girl Scout through her senior level. She started her college career by getting a scholarship, an Andrew Carnegie Scholarship, and went to Carnegie Mellon, at that time was Carnegie Institute of Technology, where she earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. Her Master of Arts in History was received from the University of Pittsburgh. The long and short of this, of Elizabeth, she was one of the first African-American to come to start teaching, and she taught at Geneva College as a professor for over 40, 50 years. But she's an academia in arts and music, and she's being inducted on July 25th into our Circle of Achievement. And that just shows that it's not all about athletes. It's academic athletes. It's about music. It's about arts. And it's all of those. We even have John Jackson for law enforcement inducted. So our belief is to revere and honor those who have achieved high achievements in their lives. So anybody have a comment on that?
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. And, one thing that those of us who played for our namesake Coach Bruno can attest to is that Coach Bruno was about more than just football. Obviously, that was his occupation, and there's no doubt about it. Anybody who's ever played for him will tell you that not only did he want to win every game, he wanted to win every play, and there was nothing that would detract from that. But be that as it may, he was much more than that. He was always concerned about what you were doing in your life and what your plans were after you left high school. He helped so many people get into college, and he didn't restrict that just to his players. He would help players from different schools, and he would help anybody. I can tell you, I was fortunate to get a football scholarship, and I would say 85% of it was because of him. The other 15% was because I tripped over the right line every now and then. And that story is one of many.
Well, to add on to that, this year's inductees, as Rick had talked earlier about the teams that we induct every year, this year we're doing a family team of musicians, the Grenadis. But they speak very highly that Larry Bruno encouraged them to continue their careers in music, and they've been in the music business for over 30-some years. So, our mission says we follow the process of teaching, coaching, and learning. When you teach, you have to be a coach, and when you teach and coach, you have to learn, because when we teach, we learn as much as our students do. And together, we collaborate, and we can become better at adding to the culture, making a better life, better community, and that's who we are. That's our purpose. So in the Larry Bruno new building down in Beaver Falls, we're designing a classroom to bring in our inductees. And I talked to Mike DeChalis, who is a teacher, a coach, and a learner, to have him come in and help us in developing some of the curriculums. I talked to Jim Tressel, who's supporting Lou Sincard this year as one of our inductees, and very close friend. And Jim's the president of Youngstown State University. He won a national championship as a coach at Ohio State. Jim's actually talking to us about teaching us a little bit about teaming and teamwork. So these are the people we're recruiting to be part of our messaging, our teaching, coaching, and learning that we want to profess in the Larry Bruno Foundation. So that's about it for now. We want to thank Kevin Farkas. He is working with us on developing these podcasts. We want to do more of them. We want to try to be more focused on the messaging that we get, and we want to thank him for his help and his guidance to help develop our programming that we would like to have at the museum. So thank you all.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.